Hello, everyone, again. We'll be focusing today on a very important and often underestimated aspect of the application, but how I normally do say it's the very game changer part of the college applications, the activity list. So, I am Faraz, the co founder with Let's Unbound, and I am genuinely excited to guide you through today's session. Whether you're just beginning your college journey or already deep into the applications, this session will give you a clear roadmap to transform what you really call a compelling story. So for students, the activity list largely has been seen as a tick box activity, but for successful applicants, it's really your platform to stand out. In the next 40 minutes, you'd really get to understand what colleges actually look for in activities. You're going to learn how to move on from just participation to leadership, break down how to write strong and concise descriptions, and explore examples of what really worked and has it worked. And again, just as a reminder, this webinar is actually part of the overall common application webinar, or the common application topic, largely focused towards US applications, because again, the activity list is a topic or aspect which is largely covered for your US applications. So by the end of the session, you'll know how to present your efforts with clarity, with confidence and strategy, whether you're applying, let's say, even via Common App, if you're applying via UC system, which is there for the universities of California, if you're going through the MIT system, you would understand how to best represent, how to create all of these various sections. Even if you're applying to the UC Austin system, where it's a different way to represent your activities, regardless of how do you represent your activities, today's session would be really covering all of the aspects of how to create your activities in the right way, how to stand out with them, would be the core of our conversation today. And a lot of students who prepare with us, they would see that while we work, we do pay a lot of attention on these activities, on how we will be creating it via roadmaps, via different ideation. How do they really stand out to create your personality is, I guess, the thought process that everyone should be keeping in their mind while we'll be discussing, how to build those standout activities today. And as always, we'll have the live question and answer session at the end. So just please use the chat box to drop in any of the questions that you may have. And also for any technical issues, as I've said, you could mark Anushree for the same. Now, before we move on to understanding the presentation today, I just want to understand which grade majority of the kids are from. So I'm just launching this quick grade poll, and I then we'll just move on from that. So if you could just quickly let me know, right? You've got grade 12s, grade 10s, right? Largely grade 10s and below. I'm just gonna have it for a couple of more seconds. If you could just quickly uh, drop in the grade that you are in. So a lot of kids here that know to find how to really plan and create your activities in ahead. Students in grade 12, you should be largely thinking it in a way that you're seeing what have you been doing, and now what's the best way of representing it on your application, right? That's one thought that kids in grade 12 can have. Largely kids in grade 8, 10, you're in the exploration phase. So I'm just stopping the poll, and we'll be now moving across with the presentation itself. But before we get into the topic of the day, giving a quick understanding about Let's Unbound, which as an organization had begun with a focus on skill building and empowering students, that gave them skills within STEM, within life skills and mentorship. Now, once these students started progressing into high school, they started seeking out for college admissions guidance, and that's where we listened. We evolved our services to seamlessly integrate the storytelling through application into our already well established mentoring program. So now, by combining personalized learning, skill development, and strategic admission support, we guide students from their early academic years to top global university applications. So today we have impacted more than 4,000 students across 25 countries, delivering more than 125,000 hours of mentoring. We have a global rating of 4.9 over a 5, and we are proud to have partnered with organizations as Harvard Students Agencies, as STEM.org, as Arizona State University Prep Digital, which has really ensured our students have gotten a world-class educational experience while preparing for these admissions abroad. Now, a quick look at the other co-founders at the organization. Amol on your left, he's a serial entrepreneur, he's an educational visionary with experiences across Tata and Exceed, which is India's largest edtech platform. Amol has helped scale impactful educational solutions across 2,000 schools in 6 countries. Nishant on your right, he is, a mentor. He's an educator. He's largely the brains behind a lot of activities and a lot of learning pathways that we have developed with 14 plus years of experience across academy and industry. He has counseled more than 1,000 students. He has designed curriculum solutions from K-12 to executive MBA programs. Moving on now to my own quick little description. So I have had experiences within consultancies spreading across automotive to banking to finance and then even within education. I have worked with organizations as Citibank, Stancy, Crimson Education, and Added Education within this field of admissions consultancy. And as I had said, now I'm currently co-founder within Let's Unbound. So that's the introduction about the organization today. And now giving you a quick flow of the session roadmap. So you could be expecting all of these various topics that we'll be covering across today from the application platform. By that, we mean your Common App platform, the UC platform, the MIT platform. How do these platforms differ from one another in terms of the application, in terms of the activity list that you need to go put across to them? And across with that, we also do still want to understand the overall narrative. We want to understand, apart from your activity list, what are the other components that go across. So in that way, you'd be able to understand exactly where does this activity list really fit into the whole application. From there, we'll go a bit more deep into the activity list. We want to understand why do they matter, what are the different types of them, what makes it impressive, and how do you really go on to build an impressive activity list. So eventually, we'll then move on to our approach and conclude the session with the resources that we do share every week. Now, moving on to the first topic of today is to understand what's the narrative in which a US admission officer is selecting for applications, right? So one of those terminologies that you would see very often used in the industry is a well lopsided profile, which very clearly differentiates from that wrongly used term for US admissions of being well balanced. A well lopsided profile actually is best represented by the letter T, right? So that's a letter T, if you'd see, look at that way. The lopsided, what do we really mean? The student being active in various different areas, but having this area of interest, this area where the student puts maximum amount of hours. So when you are writing your activity list, you do end up writing there how many hours a week do you do it, how many weeks a year do you do it, which grade have you been doing that activity from. So a lot of activities where you're showing high numbers, your capstone activities, that's that vertical stroke we talk about, supported by a few and a lot of participatory activities. And that's what we mean by a well lopsided student. A student who has got various different interests, but can also go ahead and show a strength or mastery in a couple of them. What the problem with the well-rounded is, well-rounded gives you an understanding that every activity has to be of that same caliber, which is not true. You have to have some focused activities, and then there are some participatory activities. But why is this narrative of admissions? The idea where all of this has really cropped up from is the laws of US admissions, which gives a leeway to to the student of not declaring their major. Now, once that becomes a fact, and you have 30 to 50% students, so let's say 3 to 5 students in every 10 applications not declaring their major, then the application criteria largely turns around to be your profile or the overall application, the personality that you're trying to put across. And while they're making that judgment, they're looking at your overall profile in which they want to see a couple of strength areas that may be connected to your major, may not be connected to your major, along with various different activities that you could talk across in terms of participation. So while you're creating your activity list, do keep this whole definition in mind that almost anything is important but nothing is mandatory. You want to talk about things that are, let's say, that vertical stroke that can go on to define you as a person, as a personality. Those are things of great interest, supported by a lot of participatory aspects. Now, how does this application typically look like? On screen, I'll put up the Common App. I'll just tell you how it quickly differs with, let's say, a UC application. So that first column that you see, or the first box that you see, the academics one, where you've got your SAT score, you got your grade 12 score, you got your grades from 9 to 11. And if you're on any of the domestic boards, IELTS and TOEFL is also required. And on IB and A level, you may not have to give the IELTS or TOEFL's exam. But this is one part of the application, the academics, which goes across on the Common App. More in overall, it's almost the same for UCs, bar the SAT and ACT part, because again, UCs are test blind, so they do not look into your SAT or ACT score. Otherwise, that one column across all applications, apart from that SAT part, remains the same for all of the application platforms. So that's the first part of academics. The second part, which is the main topic for today's conversation, the activities list. Common application, you've got 10 activities that you need to be, really putting them across. In terms of UCs, then you've got four categories in which you'll be putting out 20 different of them. We'll be going into much more detail. So I'm just telling you 10 activities for common application, 20 activities for UCs, four activities for MIT. What are the categories? How do they really differentiate? That is the crux of our conversation. So just skipping over this part to cover up later. The third part are your essays, which starts off with a common app personal statement if you're applying through the common application methodology. And if you're going through the common app, after your personal statement, you have college specific essays. The essay section in UCs is very much different. You have got four PIQs, which are four questions, and you select them out of a group of eight. Now, these four questions, or the whole, I would say the four answers to them, will serve the purpose of your personal statement, will serve the purpose of your college essays. So the UCs, they just have four questions to cover up the whole table three. And in terms of MIT, you'll have short, various multiple questions that again would cover up the same kind of knowledge that they kind of take from your essays, which is to understand you on a more descriptive manner, going beyond activities, going beyond capstone projects. And college essays try to understand you, how does your notion fit into that college. So how UCs do it, they ask you those four questions, and those four questions, they'll understand both of the part, that how do you describe yourself as a person? How do you connect to the UC application? And that's the same concept with MIT's multiple questions. They'll have both of these fields covered, that, what is different about you, describe you as a person, and how is it matching to the college, which is the prime function of essay. So whenever you join us for one of those sessions in which we are going in very detail of personal statement and college essays, you'll get a better view. But just to bide today's time and to focus on the activities list. So essays are just documents which you're describing yourself and trying to matching it to the college applications that you're going for. Moving on from this part, the fourth part is the letters of recommendation, two letters that you do submit. In terms of UCs, they do not have letters of recommendation, so they only listen to your voice. If I would put it across in that way, MIT has got two letters of recommendation, in which one is if you're applying for STEM, then one has to be from STEM, and the other one has to be from then can be from humanities. In terms of UTs, you could submit as many, but one is the prime requirement. The dates, just to quickly look at them, 1st November to 1st January. 1st November, the date that just went across was the early decision, early action timeline. 1st of January, which is yet to approach for even the kids in 12th today, that's the application that you'll be putting during the regulars. So this is how you communicate your overall well lopsided profile, that letter T, to the college application. And that's the 10 activities, the second column that you see. Now, just to see how does an admission officer put weightage to this 10 activity list. So just moving firstly to show you the academics that you show across, that's all 40%. Your SAT score, your predictive grades, your grade 9 to 11th, all of that is 40. And that 10 to 20 activity list that you create, either for UCs or for the common app, it's 30% of this whole application. And largely, if you see, when you're writing personal statements and essays, and if you're going across, trying to describe a personality, you're largely using activities here than academics. So what it comes across when you are in your formulative years and you're creating your activities, those activities are going to play a part to 60% of this whole application. So that's the importance that you need to think when you're looking across at these activity lists, because at one point, all of these activities would be creating, I would say, the building blocks of your whole application. The way you're going to go out and put across your personality. When MIT looks at an application and says that I'm looking for students with good marks, I'm looking for students with, let's say, even applying for engineering, but I want that inclination towards humanities. Stanford wants this inclination towards innovativeness. Harvard wants this inclination towards leadership. All of these inclinations are the core aspect of what you're creating these activities for. So it's not just about getting those great grades, because that's just 40% of what the admission officer is looking at. 60% is trying to understand your story. What better place to explain your stories than looking at your universities in that same way? So, how do universities really ask for these activities? This is a quick look through. Common App, UTs, universities, or University of California, MIT. So these are just four various platforms that largely will cover majority of your applications if you'll be going through. So Common App, you'd have approximately, no, you have up to 10 activities, in which my recommendation, you should fill each and every one of them, 150 letters of description that you need to put across onto them. What you need to write there, have you been doing that since grade 9, 10th, 11th, or 12th? You write there how many hours a week do you do it, how many weeks a year do you do it. You talk about the focus on impact. You want to talk about leadership. You want to talk about initiative across all of these various 10 activities. In terms of UT Austin, it's variable, 5 to 10 activities. And In terms of the platform, you could also, there's UT Austin can also go through Apply Texas, but looking into the Apply Texas platform, you've got 5 to 10 activities that you can largely talk about. Very flexible manner in which you upload your information, because you could just upload a resume itself, and that allows you to go well beyond character limits. So you can go into as detail in explaining your activities using the resume as the core. Now, apart from UT Aston, if you're applying for universities of California, all nine of the undergraduation branches that they have, you need to have an activity list up to 20, and you've got 350 characters per activity to describe, and your activities are spread across on four different categories. So you've got volunteering, you've got work, you've got academics, and then you've got the overall category of other, which cannot precisely go in the first three. But what this also tells you, the thought process in terms of which UCs work, you really need to think about community service. You need to think about internships. You need to think about your, let's say, research papers. You need to think about internships. All of these various things are very important for those first three categories. And then, in others, you can cover up sports, you can cover up arts, you can cover up any kind of humanities, any activity that you do, then can form part of that. But that spread does at least let you know which are those important categories that you really need to cover across if you're thinking across in terms of a UC application. Then moving on in terms of MIT, MIT has four activities. Now you see one of the biggest difference that MIT has with the other lists are that MIT really takes a in-depth view rather than looking more in breadth in terms of your activities. So they're not looking of a description in characters. They require the description to go into 200 words, but you then are only going to be describing about four activities. So that emphasis on your MIT application can really be described by your depth, by creativity, by curiosity. That's what they want to see while you're describing your overall activities for the MIT list. So that's how I would say, you should be thinking across of activities. If you're in grade 10th, if you're in grade 9, how am I going to create my 20 activities across these three categories, which in terms will get your 10 activities ready as well. And your five or four capstone activities where you really can talk about depth, you can talk about creativity or curiosity. Those are your MIT activities. So in that way, you can have, all of your platforms ready and thought across if you're looking at the activities from this perspective. Now, moving on to why do these activities actually go on to matter? So one of those first things that an admission officer would immediately tell you is that, colleges and specifically top colleges are not just about your grades. This is the heart of, holistic admissions. So academics are really essential. There's no doubt about it. They are your first round of getting accepted or rejected. Your transcripts, your test scores, the GPAs, they really reflect your academic readiness for undergraduation college life. But they're not the whole story. In fact, for most of your top schools, your activities and essays weigh just as much. Sometimes I'd even go on to say even more. So once you've cleared the academic bars, I usually tell students this is the foundation. Academics do matter, but they're just that one first piece of the puzzle. College receives, I would say, tons and thousands of applications with students with strong grades. So what they're really trying to find out is who are you beyond these numbers? So that's that whole part about looking at these college application beyond your grades. The second point is they want to know who you are beyond your classroom. So here's where your personality, your values, the direction begin to show. Activities are the real first sign of who you are when no one is telling you what to do. Now, this really goes on to show what excites you, where do you choose, and how do you choose to spend your time. What do you really stick around with things? So that's whole aspect of understanding, is this something that you started from grade 9, 10th, 11th, you've dedicated 4 constant years into an activity, you're giving hours every week into this activity. So how do you really stick with those activities, those commitments beyond your classroom are a very good representation of this activity list. Now, another thing that they also do see in these activity list, as a person, are you someone who can come across and say that you take ownership? That have you gone on to solve a problem or have really led something beyond just the grades that a student may come and try to show across? So this section of the application is really your chance to tell your story through your action. So this is your chance to show that you're a person much beyond your grades. So this is where I would say your violin recital, or let's say a social campaign, a simple coding project, or even tutoring underprivileged classroom for a continued period of time. Very important, the continued period of time becomes very meaningful. It starts to really reflect your intent and impact of using your education, using your knowledge to better the world around you, or to using your information to better use or put it across in some practical aspect. Now, lastly, activities also show a list. They show leadership, they show initiative, they show passion, they show impact. So these four terms have to be really in your thought process when you're thinking about creating those activities, which are the ones that I'm going to be finally going through. Can I show leadership? Can I show that, it is about not just about, and by leadership, I'm not saying just about that club president thing. With leadership, am I saying, have I really come out and shown some innovative leadership where I have started a new club or a new group, not just joined something and became the leader of it? And that's that whole part of the next aspect of initiative. Passion is also very important, right? Why are you doing it? How can you come across and show that you really care about it? And lastly, and very importantly, what was the result? What was the impact that all of these activities had? So these are those three things that all of your college applications are looking for. So this is the shift from what you submit, like activities and essays, to why it really matters. And that's why college pays so much attention to this whole aspect. Now, after understanding why do these activities really matter, let's have a quick look at which are the types of common application activities that you can see in them. So, firstly, going into this area, your activities can be divided into two different sections. You could have academic activities and you could have non-academic activities. So, the first one that you're seeing is academic activities. The next slide that we will move on is to non-academic activities. So, the sum total of the activities that you put in Common App or UCs can come from either of the two slides, and both of the slides are equally important. One of the most important things that you should always remember, that everything is important, nothing is mandatory. And there's nothing to say that either, let's say, an internship of an academic activity is more or less important than any of the activities written here. Neither does it say that any of the activities written on the on your non-academic side is more important than, for example, a research project or a academic club or a summer program that you may have gone for. Everything comes across on the same side. So now let's firstly focus across in your academic activities. Let's start with the most obvious, your academic clubs. So clubs like a math club, a science club, an economic forum are classic academic clubs that you could be looking across at. What I would also suggest for the innovative kids, try it, and obviously it's only for those kids where you've got this permission to start new clubs at your school. Try to look at those club topics which are offshoot of the current ones existing, but you could have enough people join across with you where you could initiate a club on its own. But what matters overall in the whole club journey, if you're the initiative leader or if you're someone who has joined in, it is how regularly did you participate? How regularly were you part of organizing activities? Getting aspects done. How regularly were you on practice, at least leading the team? So it's not again just about the name of the club or you've just started it. What is the action and impact of these academic clubs, which is very important, where you're also consistently showing passion, you're showing innovativeness across with action and impact. Remembering those four important things that I said: leadership, initiative, passion, impact. Very four important things across all of these various different activities. Now, just moving on to the second part, which is your research or your projects, which this includes, almost yeah, any project that you show that you can show across. Again, that whole action and impact is important. This includes independent research. It includes your science fair submissions, mentorship programs, or even initiatives like your ISEFs. The key is to show that you have gone beyond what you learned through, let's say, a class, or you've learned through a various course, and have gone in much more depth on your own in terms of a very critical research in the topic that you've been studying. So, colleges that you're applying for, which are extremely research focused, your MITs of the world, your U Chicagos of the world, UC Berkeley, Caltechs, they all love to see a research paper, specifically if you're applying for any of the sciences, any of the STEM programs. Right. Moving on from there, internship is another very good category that you could think across while preparing for your academic aspect of the activities. And they're very similar to research projects again, because they come across as a practical implementation of the theoretical knowledge that you would be learning either through your academics in school, either through courses, which really show across that as a student, you're not just someone who's taking in information, but are taking that one step ahead in practical implementation of the knowledge that you're getting across. So those internships are really very strong things that you could show across. When we talk about courses, we're not just restricting ourselves to, let's say, just online certifications and courses as Harvard CS50. We also do talk about APs, APs for students who are in IB, in A level, in CBSE, and all of these Indian domestics board. How do APs really come across and help you? Students in America are not really looking at APs in that perspective. So when you talk about courses, you're looking at summer programs as well. So getting enrolled in any of these top summer programs where they can be either science-based, STEM-based. Summer programs are also just more about understanding undergraduation life. So either of these aspects, if you go for APs, you go for summer programs, both of them also do earn you college credits in this whole application process, apart from showing you across really strong academic activities that you have done selecting beyond your school. And remember that part when we say taking ownership of your learning and doing more learning activities beyond the mandated school learning that you're doing. So any of these four activities should, while being created, thought across in terms of leadership, of initiative, of passion and impact, you could really create a good part of those activities list just under these specific four headings. And now for students who want to be looking at activities beyond your academics as well, and there are a lot of kids who have got various natural talents and various natural aspects. So for them, you could also then start looking at the non-academic activities, which takes us to the next slide of our presentation. Beyond your academic activities, the non-academic activities that you can also talk across on. So here we start the list with one of the first fundamental activities which majority of the colleges are looking for: community service. How have you given back to the community, to the society around you, to the underprivileged world around you? Have you been looking at opportunities of teaching the underprivileged? Have you been thinking about fundraising activities, cleanup drives? All of these various important aspects really does show that you have this aspect of empathy, this aspect of civic responsibility. And do remember, this part is not just about hours. So it's not just trying to say that I did so many hours a week or so many weeks a year. It's really about showing the impact, the intention behind the activity that you did. So again, those passion, the intention, the initiative, the leadership, very, very much important while you're creating these activities as well. In the community service, even more important than the rest, that you do think about the impact that all of your activities are leaving. And don't just try to do those community services where you just join a Lions Club and participate along with another organization. What you want to show under your community service is definitely initiative leadership, where you're starting something off, where you could come across and say in a way that had you not taken up this topic, this impact would not have been felt, which is impossible to show across by participating in organizations as Lions Club. Now, beyond your community service, which I largely believe almost every student should be having in their portfolio, you move on to your creative arts. Now, again, from this point onwards, it's not mandatory to have any of these, or let's say all of these. All of these are natural activities that a student gets inclined towards. So dependent on which is your calling, you can start to select from here. So under creative arts, you could, move between painting to graphic design to photography, filmmaking, creative writing, digital art, almost any type of these activities, any courses, any competitions, any NGO connected work to creative activity as well can be shown across in your non-academic activity list. Moving on to performance arts, theater, dance, music, spoken word, band performance, along with sports, and then you could also see public speaking. All of them really do hold a very strong aspect. When we talk about passion projects, we're really talking about then also moving into your blogs, your YouTube channels, thinking across in terms of a startup, social campaigns. You could also look at in terms of different competitions that also do exist. So all of these various non-academic activities really help you solidify your overall application. So when you're thinking about the activity list, this is the list of non-academic activities that you could look at. And just a quick recap at the list of academic activities you should be thinking while creating this application process, right? Now, moving on to the next topic, what makes let's say, an activity impressive? So, as we explore, how to build a powerful application, this slide, I want you to really internalize, right? It's not about how elite an activity sounds. It's not about how many certificates you can show across on it. It's really about substance behind the work, the thought, the growth, the drive, very importantly, and how clearly those things come out through to the reader. And for the top applications, what they're really scanning for, it's this term that we like to use, intellectual vitality. So that's not just how smart you are, it's really how alive your mind is. So let's now walk through the 5 qualities that really make an activity from coding to, let's say cooking, as the generation would say today, impressive in the eyes of an admissions reader. Let's start with the first part, breadth over your depth over breadth. So most students feel the pressure to do almost everything under the sky. All of those lists that I just those points that I had shown you across, they try to use these various lists not as a reference list. Remember, I told you everything is important, nothing is mandatory. So what they do, they don't look into this list and say reference list. They look into this list and say checklist. So what does that checklist mean? They would want to do everything. Right now, they'll join 10 clubs, they'll take 6 courses, they'll try to do a bit of music, they'll try to do a bit of sports. But the truth here, honestly, is that colleges are not really looking for that kind of variety. They're looking actually for depth. And that's why we always talk about well lopsided. They want a depth in certain areas. You could have participation areas, but everything cannot be participation. They really want to know Did the student immerse themselves into something very important? Did they really care enough to keep going when it got difficult, which will definitely will if you're looking at something for a 4 year engagement? Did they learn for the joy of learning, or did they do it for the reason of ticking a box? So, example, a student spent, let's say, 1 year building a database of all the stray animals in their neighborhood, tagging feeding schedules, let's say linking it to Google Maps, and even though it wasn't for a school assignment, that starts to show depth. And then moved on to create a whole solution working for another year. And then you show 2 to 3 years of work on this activity. That's when you show depth. That's the ownership of learning, and that is intellectual vitality. Now, I wonder. Now, once we'll move on to the next slide, I will definitely give you a much more depth definition of intellectual vitality. For now, just understand passion of learning for the word. Now, moving on from the whole aspect of depth versus breadth, let's look into initiative, because that's one word you remember I had been constantly using while describing those list of activities. So, intellectual vitality is all about self motivation. So, ask yourself, did I build something that didn't exist before? Did you, let's say, start a club at school? Let's say, did you want to organize a speaker series on a topic that you really cared about? Hasn't happened before. Created a newsletter, a website, or an app that solved a real problem that no one was thinking across on. Now, here's the real secret on this. Initiative is really convenient. It's it's really, it's really that inconvenience that people haven't gone across in it. So, and that's what really makes it impressive. When you are rarely doing things which are convenient and thinking across of starting something new or solving an issue that no one has wanted to go into. So when you step outside the bounds of what a school expects and go after an idea, anyway, just trying to make a honest attempt in giving this a solution, that's when the college will get up and try to pay attention. So try to think about areas and aspects in which you can take the initiative and start something off new. And that brings us to the third point in terms of leadership. And it is the initiative leadership that really colleges and schools think across. You don't have to be a head boy or a club president. You need to be someone who takes a new club idea, who takes a new program idea and has it started, who thinks of a new NGO concept and starts it across. Fourth, at the end of it, recognition isn't the most important part, but what it still does for you, it really does amplify your story. It tells the college that the world around you has saw what you did and believe that it really mattered. So this can be an award, this can be a newspaper mention, it can be a competitive program that you may have been selected for, right? There's a diamond challenge that you could also participate on, and it's very similar to getting recognition for community service as well. Even a teacher nominating you for any activity, that is also some kind of recognition that you could show across. So recognition again is very important. Lastly, what really makes an activity impressive is always longevity, where you could showcase that this activity does not conclude on the end of your application stage. It goes on beyond. It starts to show that you have done this activity for an objective of the activity itself, but not just to represent it across into an application. It shows maturity, it shows self discipline, and that you really stuck with something long enough till you have made the situation better around. So these are the five things that you need to be really thinking across in terms of your activity, how to make them impressive. Now, one word that you really need to understand, intellectual vitality, which will close this aspect of impressive activity list. Intellectual vitality as an admissions officer, this is from Harvard University. He would, typically explain to me saying that, you see, intellectual vitality takes various forms. Lots of APs and college courses, long-term papers really don't sum up to this aspect of guaranteeing an active enjoyment and engagement in the learning process. Nor do those large activity lists become distinctive in their pool. What is an intellectual activity list? It is one that shows significant responsibility of your learning process, shows maturity and self-discipline in fulfillment of a project, often well beyond the limitations of a school assignment. So that's what you all, in an overall, need to be thinking across when you're thinking about an impressive activity list. Make sure that you have got these five activities thought across and intellectual vitality thought across while you're going in and selecting your activity list. Now, moving on to the other part of saying why start early, right? So, intellectual vitality, overall, I would say to create it in the right way takes time. But it's something that I would say wouldn't just show up in a week. It really builds over you going through various reading materials that really weren't aside, running your side projects that no one asked for, digging into ideas just because you're curious, and overall failing and starting again. So that's the kind of passion that you need to take while you're thinking about intellectual vitality, and that
Uh, Please, I would request everyone to please wait for a minute. Let me just get in touch with Faraz. He will join back soon.
yeah, I guess someone mistakenly signed me out or something. I've just joined back. Give me 1 second before I can just reshare my screen.
Thank you.
Sorry for this hang up that we've had in the middle of the presentation. Just give me a second.
Thank you so much, Farah.
Right, I guess you guys can see my screen properly. Right, Kanishri, I guess you guys can see my screen properly.
Yes, yes, Faraz.
Yeah, so just give me a second. I'm restarting my. And is the screen showing currently or is it on pause?
Why start early is the screen.
Why start early? Perfect. I was just lining up everything again. Sorry for the the break that we just had. We were just moving on to the second aspect of recognition isn't instant. Now, let's be honest. Recognition really does matter, and that's one thing that I was also speaking in the previous slide. It's not everything, but it really does give the right kind of credibility to your story. But again, it takes time to build. Getting the following of a podcast to increase, the traction to increase for a website, results that need to come out from a community campaign that you're thinking across. Overall, if you're going for competition, submissions have typical dates. You're thinking about an Olympiad, the whole life cycle of moving from the first round to the Olympiad round is 2 years. So you understand that many of for these deadlines for awards, for summer programs, for academic competitions, they can move anywhere between 6 months, 12 months to even 24 months to get it completed before your applications go out. So if you start too late, you might have a greater effect, greater effort to put across for the same kind of outcome that a student may be getting if they just started a little bit earlier. So starting early gives your work the runway it really needs to be seen, to be tested, to be refined and shared. Now, third, very importantly, initiative needs space. We talked about initiative earlier. Building something from scratch is difficult, but building those initiative really takes much more energy, and that energy is spent over a larger time. So, if you want to launch, for example, a non-profit, publish a research paper, let's say create a youth run application or organize a TEDx event, you'll need to validate your idea. You need to find a mentor, get feedback, run the fail and course correct options, scale it up. And thus, starting early gives you the margin to build something real, not just something that looks good on paper, but something that you could really go across and show to the college that you made a real difference. They can tell when something was really rushed across, and they can tell when something was done in the right pace so it lived up to the expectation. Fourth, consistency shows maturity. And here's the final piece. Your timeline really does matters. Admission officers don't just look at what you did, they look at when you did it and how long you stuck with it. And that's where, again, writing those aspects there, that how many hours a week you do it, how many weeks a year do you do it, become extremely more important. So the final thought, when when you really get started, grade 9, I would say, is really ideal. Grade 10 is still strong, but my one message would be start now. Students that are already in grade 12, my one strong suggestion to you is go back into your grade 9 years and try to think what were those core activities that you have been doing that really tick boxes, all of those things that I've covered up to date till this stage. Now, how to build an impressive activity? Always begin with an interest. So, for example, let's go into let's say as this as an example. So this was this, so a student who was really passionate about, let's say, two things, food and social justice. That combination might really sound, let's say, unusual at first, but for her, it made perfect statement. She cared deeply about ethical sourcing and community welfare, and that was her natural starting point. Now, let's take it to step two, link the school role to a local activity. Rather than wait for an opportunity, she joined her school's fair trade committee. She worked on, let's say, promoting an ethical sourcing in the school cafeteria and among students. This gave her real experiences, a support structure, and, let's say, early sense of leadership. Step three, expand the scope. After some time, let's say the student realized the work of the committee was limited in reach, she then, let's say, ask herself, how can I take these values beyond the school and reach a wider community? This is where many students stop, but that's where she pushed forward, expanding the scope. Step four, brainstorm the project ideas. So she started brainstorming some of those ideas, including running a social media campaign, organizing school workshops, and eventually the most exciting one, creating the Fair Trade Festival, public event that brought together vendors, students, and community members to promote awareness and change. Eventually, shortlist and plan turn that idea into a real project, using tools like SWOT analysis, evaluating strengths and risk. And then she set herself the SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, and then laid out the whole week by week plan and went out to execute it in the right. Right. So this then moves on to your step six, which is then to execute your planning week by week. Moving on to the seventh point of building the public presence, which she knew that event success would really depend on the visibility. So what she did was to create a simple website. She used the Instagram page with countdowns and speaker reveals, posters in school and community centers, email campaigns running across, press release that is happening. So she promoted the event as best as she could. Moving on to then the next step of adding that unique element, she invited that local businessman who ran with ethical chocolate company as the guest speaker. She also included an interactive art installation where attendees could write pledges about their food choices. So giving it something unique that would increase the footfall into this event. Step 9 then came across with launch, and in that step, you want to document everything. You want to capture the photos and videos for using it on social media later. You want to get feedback forms filled, ask speakers and vendors for testimonials. So all of these various things then, in a way become the proof of you doing this whole aspect. Lastly, the step that you would always want to conclude of is by your follow up and reflect in how do you conclude all of these activities in the way that you could also go and get some recommendations. You could go and get some more recognition for this activity that she then went on to do. So this is how you could look across in building a complete activity. We, for the sake of time, will not be going in extreme detail about the research activity. I just now want to show you a couple of examples taken straight from our students who have worked on admissions. This is their common app section for the activity list. This is just to show you a visual of how your common application would look on the activity list section itself. So that part where you could see how many hours a week do you need to put, how many weeks a year do you need to put, the grade from which this activity started, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. and then the description that you can see on the right side. And likewise, this is another, so this is activities for a STEM kid. This is the kind of activities you could see for a humanities student, describing the activity list in the common application section. Right, so this is just to give you the various examples. This is to give you a few more examples as well, that you could look across for, even something as geometry and trigonometry within music, within all of these. Right now, just moving on to the next part of our presentation, the approach. What is the approach that we largely do take across when we ever we work with kids? One of those primary things that we have seen, that majority students, parents have very little information of now the complex university scenarios that have been created, though the complex job scenarios that have been created, that 93% of them only know about 7 career options, very specific university knowledge. So how do you go through this whole process where you do understand the things that we have covered for the last 1 hour is just one part of this whole application. So when we start working with students, we start with a psychometric test. We move into college counseling. We help them build all of these activity list. We help them with their profile building. We give them the complete roadmap for this whole journey, and then conclude in terms of your application and admissions guidance, where we will stop once your application has been accepted and you've gone through with the visa process. This is just to show you an overall timeline of a student working across with us, joining us at different grades. The first thing that we do is always the candidacy building, understanding the interests, the strengths that a student has, where we then move on to your extracurriculars, where we help students in, joining clubs, working and getting part of courses and competitions. And we do always pay a very important aspect to this personal voice, where we are doing consistent personal statement workshop sessions, where we're doing reflection sessions as well. And then eventually, once you move on to your grade 11th and 12th, we would help you in terms of selecting your subjects, giving you support in your competitions and capstone projects. And then we do move across to your standardized testing support as well within SAT and ACT. And in grade 12, the work largely becomes closure of our activities, as closing the personal statements, the essays, the activities, understanding the impact that your application will have. And the conclusion of your grade 12 would be having the application sent across and having those them accepted. And the whole process really concludes off at the visa stage. Just to have a look at all of the services that we provide across the three pillars in terms of testing across SAT, PSAT, AP, school results, to the second pillar of profile building, where we help you in leadership activities, clubs, passion projects, community service, the whole activity list that needs to be created for profile building. And we will give you complete support in the admissions and applications prep as well, on in terms of university selections, personal statements, and personal essays, letters of recommendation. So your one-stop shop for all your requirements of admissions. Now, just to share you across two success stories of kids that have worked with us. This is a student who went into Dartmouth with a really top SAT score of 1550, participated on an essay competition with Oxford, founded an NGO, and he was a talented solo singer and performed at charity events. So you can see the whole different kind of activities that we were just talking about being represented for a successful applicant. This is just a quick look of applicant for Rice University admit. And you could have a quick look at the different things that this student also did, just in her journey into a top application. Now, moving across from the success stories to the resources that we do share consistently. So this platform that we are constantly using every weekend, as we just did cover the common application activity list. Now, next weekend, we will be going into crack the SAT as a topic. So we'll be covering SAT in extreme details. I request as many as parents who are listening to us today, who found value in the information that we have shared, do join us across next weekend, same time, and we will be discussing SAT in extreme detail. Now, we also do use this platform, the newsletter, to share out as much as information possible. You could use the QR code at the bottom to scan and get access to this College Crest newsletters. And then we cover a varied range of topics, from UK admissions to US admissions, different aspects of both those countries, different countries as well. So just giving a couple of more seconds for parents to take a screenshot or scan the QR code at the bottom. Right. Now, moving on to the next two platforms, our podcast on YouTube, where we put out a lot of different videos in terms for admissions understanding. And then the second QR code is for students who would want to join a WhatsApp group sharing. Again, the object of sharing a lot of information, making equal playing field on the understanding of admissions abroad. Students who are interested in a SAT diagnostic, kids in 10th and 11th, can use now the QR code on the screen to get access to the same. We'll give a complete report of your SAT standing currently. Lastly, if you want a quick webinar or a quick presentation or a one-on-one counseling session with any of our top counselors, do use the QR code on your screen now to connect with us, and we would be conducting a one-on-one session with you where we could give you a very good understanding about your activity list, about your application status, and if you'd want, we could then run the whole program for your student, for your kid, in journeying them into a top college admission. So, this is the whole presentation for today. I am now concluding in terms of the presentation, but not the webinar. I'll just leave this QR code on your screen if you want to just register for a one-on-one session or register for any documents or any connectivity that you want to maintain with us. So you could do that. Otherwise, I'll use the chat section now to see any questions that any of the students may have after the presentation, or we would then conclude our session now. Just waiting for another couple of seconds to see if there are any questions from the participants currently. Otherwise, I will conclude the session for today. Right, so I'm just giving it just a few more seconds. If there are no questions, then we would be concluding our presentation and webinar. Right, I think there is one question. Does LinkedIn certificates carry weightage? I mean, it would really depend on what is the course or which is the activity that you're really talking about, and how does it really bind into your story. So it's not just because it's a LinkedIn certificate, what is the exact weightage does it carry? How does it bind into your overall story will define the weightage, because the weightage is on the story, not the certificate. So I would want to have more information. My suggestion would be if you could, just take the QR code scan, and then we could get onto a one-on-one session where I could understand what certificates are you also referring to. I have another question. In case a student has not covered 10 activities, what can they put on their application? You see, the whole issue in answering this question now is that what do you already have? I'm not saying that every applicant has always put up 10. It is recommended that you need to put up 10 activities. But let's suppose if the first initial ones are strong enough, you know, there's no stopping. There's no law that says that you need to put up all 10. But dependent on which degree that you're going for, I may be able to suggest what are new activities, and depending on which grade you're also on, it'll also guide me that how much time do you have till you represent something. So if you're in 12th, I can't suggest you anything sitting in November to add on to an activity. I think largely what I'll be saying, let's do a session of remembering the things that you used to do and how we can now best represent it on the current stage. So I think again for you as well, I'd say if you could use the QR code, I'd need much, much more information before I could give you a personalized advisory on that question. Right, so there's no option to submit any proof or activity. So how can we submit that, or is it needed? So I think what you're asking me, that you're asking, how do we certify an activity, right? Obviously, there's certain activities where you could very clearly show across a certificate, Trinity School of Music. So you do have a certificate for it. You could submit it into the document section after writing it onto your activity list that you have done Trinity, for example, grade 8. Now, there may be some activities, or imagine if you play the guitar quite a lot, but you've got no courses or you've got no certificate activity. Then, in that case, merging that activity with an NGO activity, with a community service, and then backing it up with a social media platform can be that way that you can certify aspects. So don't think of certification of activities or proving activities only through certificates. Letters of recommendations in the 2 LOR section can do that. More letters of recommendation in the document section can do that certification point. Social media, more impactful, those recognition points that I was even talking about in the presentation today can also, play that form of certifying. So it's not just the certification. Again, I again said, I guess if you could, talk on that one-on-one state, I would be able to then guide you much more specifically. Right. I think there is one more question that's coming across. As for grade 9, can we still cover these? As for grade 9, can and grade 110%, grade 9 is the sweetest time to start off with these activities. What you need to do is have 5, 6, 7 brainstorming sessions, Avani, of understanding what are my natural inclinations, what are the reasons that I can be selecting to do an internship or a research, and how can we do it? Create a complete roadmap around it. I guarantee you a student starting in grade 9 can create 20 activities for all of your UCs. I have done that multiple times with my students, so there is absolutely no problem in that. Right, so you do have a lot of time. If you're in grade 9, you can cover all of these activities. Right, now moving on to the other question. And things done for CAS counts, or does that not count for these activities? You can show your CAS project. You can definitely show your CAS project in your activity list. It's not part of your school projects. It goes there. So, but then again, yeah, you can show it. There's no two-way on it. But I would also want to know what depth did you take the CAS project? Because a lot of time what's happening that students know at the start of you creating this CAS that you'll get that one part. The right amount of seriousness is not there. So I want to evaluate the project on its own before I could, let's say on a personal level, tell you, Devna, to either put it there or not put it there. So Devna, again, my final suggestion for you is use the QR code, book a one-on-one session. I would want to understand what is the depth of your CAS project before I could give you that final suggestion. What clubs to join in grade 12? I mean, the only problem about joining clubs in grade 12, Raja, is that it really looks very strongly to be have done just to fill the application list. What I'll suggest you is let's have a one-on-one session in which I could understand your other activities and give you a suggestion how you could create your 10 activity list without the need of joining a club in grade 12. Otherwise, if you want to join a club for the sake of interest, then I could suggest you a lot of things to do. You have done clubs in 9th, 10th, 11th. Let's use those now. Let's use those 9th, 10th, 11th. Let's think of how we can represent a lot of 9th, 10th, and 11th. And that's the trick to this application. The more 9th, 10ths that you can show in terms of activities, the more intellectual vitality that you communicate. Now, my daughter is in grade 8 now, and how should we start? Smita, one of my suggestion is pick up your camera, scan the QR code. That's step one. Step two, what I want to do with you is I would want to sit down, understand me and Amol, either of us can do this call. We'd want to understand what are the interests that your daughter has. What are the things that really shine her eyes up? What is she interested towards? Let's say either of those academic things, research, internships, jobs. Does she have an idea of a major that she wants to study or not? So understanding her needs, her requirements is where do you start from. Once you start to understand this, that's when we start to build a roadmap of how do I take these interests to convert it into a strong personality, a personality that looks admissible at a top university. And that's when you start plugging in the university requirements. I always suggest when you're thinking about how do I start working towards admission, start looking inward. Create a process, create a system. We would help you create the same if you could, join into a one-on-one session. Devna, yes, my last question is profile building is required only for USA and not other countries. Devna, see how I would like to answer this question as an academician or as a counselor is profile building is required as a life skill. Right? It is used for USA 110%. If you're not going for USA, does not mean you don't need to create a strong profile, personality, and research about yourself. That is required as just basics of going through life. Otherwise, if your question is a profile going beyond your majors is only required for USA, 110%. That's only required for USA. But even if you're applying for UK for your kid, or if Devna, you're the student yourself, you don't just want to be a person who's only identified by academics, numbers, and grades eventually in life, right? You want to become a person much more beyond that. And that's where we as an organization like to do profile building. It's not there just because I want to send students to states. I want students to get into degrees with strong convictions. Why am I doing this degree? How does my overall personality fit into me doing this degree? Not we just looking at a job available outside and we blindly do a degree to achieve it. So in that case, profile building is not just required for USA applications, it's required for your profile building. Right, Smith. Right. So if there are no further questions, and if you've all used the opportunity to use the QR code, because what this QR code does for you is you've understood my message on one to many. This QR code will help you understand this message one to one. How does all of this information translate to you or to your student for whom you have listened to this presentation? Right. So now we're concluding of this session. Thank you guys for attending. I hope this presentation has made sense to you guys. And I really hope if I could speak as to many of you guys on this one-on-one over this coming weeks. Thank you.